Got Jansen here. So I thought I'd do a follow-up video of the last two videos that we did, which were the five conversation hypnosis questions or language patterns per se that you should be asking clients. If you haven't seen those, just skip back a few videos. There's a two-part video to that, and I go through five questions plus a special key or note that gives you some insight into some more advanced strategies to help you ask better questions as a therapist, especially in advanced conversation hypnosis. So what I thought I'd follow up this with is really the next troubleshooting or the next teething problem our students have, or really any therapist can have, which is what conversation hypnosis question should I ask next? It's all well and good to follow those five questions that I gave you, but sometimes people get stumped. They don't know what move to make next. They can't get curious enough. They can't formulate good questions. Now, I can give you those questions, like I said, in those five, but there's also something called frames, question frames, which are different categories to get you thinking on the spot as a therapist. Now, this is quite advanced. If you haven't seen those other two videos, go watch them, but let's get into this. What conversation hypnosis question to ask next if you get stuck or you don't know what to do with your client next? Now, this is regardless of the niche. So let's go through question frames, not specific questions, okay? So number one, I always go back to this. Anytime I am stumped for what to ask my client next, or whether I'm doing a demo or when I'm teaching, I always come back to this. What are you most curious about from what your client has said so far? So if I ask my client, what's the problem? How is that a problem? Give me more information. I'm doing my normal hypnotic interview, the investigation to find the unconscious payoff / the root cause. My client's going to say several things. And it's up to me to listen. This, again, why you can't have techniques, because if you're spending so long doing the five-step technique, you're missing out on what people are saying. What are you most curious about from what your client has said so far? What doesn't fit? I always go back to logic, okay? Logic's and understanding logic as far as doing therapy, even using the conscious mind, is an incredibly powerful tool that no one gets taught, no one uses, because we're all taught that you have to get the conscious mind out of the way. Absolutely not. You want to keep the conscious mind there because it's going to give you responses that you can frame next to unconscious responses. Okay. It gives you a parallel and it's easier to understand those unconscious responses. So what are you most curious about? Based on what your client has said, what's stuck in your brain? Like, hang on, that doesn't make sense. Like, you said you want to lose weight, but you love eating chocolate cake. That doesn't make sense. Now, instantly, I know the therapists are going to watch this. That's just a very, very basic example. It's very hard to do a role play just off the top of my head. Therapists are going to say, oh, Scott, I'd go into doing a parts integration. My response is, why? You're still solving the symptom. We don't even know what it is yet. Okay, so that's just a little side note. So we're not solving things. Whenever you go into a conversation hypnosis session trying to solve things, you'll use techniques and they're symptom-based. We all know this. We're all taught this. If you go into solving things, it means that you're starting to put pressure on the parts of your client that have no relevance to the response, that have no relevance to the unconscious moments, that have no relevance to the unconscious payoff. You're making stuff up in your head. We're not solving things with techniques. So if you get really curious, what has your client said so far? What doesn't fit based on their responses? What doesn't follow logic? All logic has a flaw. And I love finding that flaw. Because if your client's living through that flawed logic, which all human beings do, and I give them that logic back to them, that flawed logic, and they turn around and say, geez, I never thought of that before. Hang on, wow. And bang, things start to collapse. The loop starts to break. Their old way of doing things starts to break. We want to find what is the flaw in that logic based on what they said. What are they living through that doesn't fit reality? Okay, so always go back to that. That's why if you've been to our ACH training, you've seen our demo videos, I'll always ask the therapist in the hot seat as the therapist, what are you most curious about so far? What stands out in your mind? What doesn't fit? Where's the flaw in the logic? What's not sitting right? What's standing out to you? What's got your curiosity piqued? That's the question. And it's not a hypnotic question where you've got to use techniques and language patterns and all that. I'm not talking about that. You just want to ask them, hang on, you said this. That really doesn't make sense because you also said this. How the hell does that work? Now, if you're ever wondering how do you do a parts integration with conversation hypnosis, that was it right there. This whole thing of lifting hands and putting them together and putting them on your heart, obvious. It just doesn't fit normal conversation, especially when you're trying to catch your clients unaware. So the way that we do a parts integration to keep going with this is if a client says this, I'll say, hang on, you've said this, but you also said this. How the hell does that work? And that's one of the most incredible hypnotic language pattern. How the hell does that work that you can use because you're asking your client to to explain both parallel realities. Both, we call them clashing realities at the same time. And that's enough to confuse your client and quote unquote explode that and collapse that reality into something new where real unconsciousness comes out. Now, again, that's very advanced. Don't worry about that too much for now. But again, that's the question frame I'm always going back to. I apologize if I get off topic sometimes, but it's all included. What are you most curious about when it comes to your client? What have they said that stands out that you think, hang on, that doesn't really make sense? That's question frame number one. Number two, one of my favorites, what are they not telling me? Now, I've got to be careful with this because, sure, I'm going to make an assumption. I'm going to assume that, hang on, you're not telling me this because maybe you're afraid or you don't know or you don't want to reveal it because you're embarrassed. I'm going to ask them, hey, is this what you're trying to tell me? Is this what you can't tell me? Now, I'm making an assumption here, so I have to test these things. It's a fine line between making an assumption and believing it because you're the therapist and you know all, which you don't, or testing everything. I always make, and again, I'll do this in the past with my clients as well. I make a hell of a lot of mistakes when I do demos, but I test all of these assumptions. They don't look like mistakes because even mistakes give me incredible information about where I really need to go. So it's a win-win for everyone. Like all roads lead to Rome is what we say. But what I'm talking about here is what are they not telling me? What am I curious about? What can't they tell me? And sometimes when you get incredibly good instincts in this, and Erickson was a genius at this, you'll say, hey, is this really what's going on? And your client looks at you dumbfounded and says, how the hell did you know that? Like, oh my God, that's it. And bang, they go into this weird thinking trance where their eyes are closed and they're dribbling on themselves. And of course, I'm hamming it up here, but that's what I'm looking for. Sometimes I'll get it right, sometimes I won't. But I'm going to test all these things. I'm not going to make an assumption. I have to test these things. The way you test these things is say, hey, client, is this what you mean? They're either going to say, no, that's not what I mean. What I mean is this, which is great. They give me information. Or they say, you're a genius. How the hell did you know that? That's exactly what's going on. Like you're a mind reader. Either way, we win. So what are they not telling me, guys? Number three, again, one of my favorites. This is really advanced, quite hard to teach. It's more this thing comes up live on demos. What I call big picture thinking. I'll often ask my clients if I get stumped or don't know what to do next, or I'm hitting a brick wall, which I do. I'm not immune to it. Okay. I'll ask myself, what's missing? Oh, sorry. I'll ask my client, what's missing? So a client says, what do you mean? And I say, well, you're a smoker and you want to quit. What's missing? Now, notice what I said there. What's missing or what are you searching for? These are big open-ended questions, and I'm going to keep them open-ended. Why? Because I need the unconscious mind to fill in the gaps. My client has anxiety, and I say to a client, okay, so what you're telling me is you've got anxiety, you can't get over it. What are you looking for? What are you searching for? Now, if I said, what are you looking for in regards to helping you overcome your anxiety, too much information. That's too much conscious information, too many words. I'm going to keep it open-ended. And this works for any niche. So you can ask for what's missing, what are you looking for, what are you searching for, what are you trying to feel? Open-ended. And let the client look at you a bit dumbfounded because it's almost like a non sequitur because I'm not filling in the gaps. I want my client to fill in the gaps. It doesn't quite fit normal conversation. So a client says, Scott, I'm a smoker and I want to quit. It's affecting my health, but I just can't seem to overcome it because I just love smoking. Okay, great. So what's missing? And I pause. Think about it for yourself. Ask yourself that question in regards to your life. What's missing? What am I searching for? If I give, I say this with tongue in cheek during the trainings, but it's really true. People say, well, what's a better question that I can get instant access to the unconscious mind? Everyone's looking for that magic question. First off, it doesn't exist. But what you can do is keep your questions open-ended. If you want an unconscious response, less words, least words possible. If you want a conscious response, add in heaps of conscious fluff and words, and the conscious mind will answer you with more lies and more assumptions. Okay, so I'm really a big fan of just asking what's missing, what are you searching for, and just sitting back and waiting. Big unconscious moments come from this. If you've been to our ACH trainings and our masters of ACH training, you know we talk a lot about big picture because it's so powerful. Okay, so number one, number two, number three. Let's get into number four. This is one of my favorites. Again, it is really all my favorite. This is an Ericksonian technique. What should I ask but don't want to? Now, what do I mean by this? Therapists have a tendency to not ask questions because they don't want to come across as rude. For me, I don't care. I don't care if my client likes me. I don't care if I have rapport. All that stuff is a big waste of time. I'm there to ask the hard questions. I remember on one ACH training that we did, I won't tell you the person's name, but the student came on to the call. He did the training with us, and he became the client. We had a therapist that was doing the training with him, as in, we're coaching the person. That's how we do it. We have one therapist, one client, and I'm the coach, and we do this with real sessions. And it was around anxiety about getting married. And the normal fluff came up. I don't want to do this. She said that. I don't want about this, and arguments, blah blah blah. And I said to the therapist at the time, who was a training student, I said, "Well, ask a question you don't want to ask. Ask a question and don't care about being rude." The student couldn't come up with it. And I said, "Let me give you an example." And I said to the student at the time, who was the therapist, and this was a real problem for him. We use real problems when doing these trainings. I said, "Do you want to get married?" Now, in the context of the session, doesn't sound like much now, but it also, who are we as a therapist? It's like me turn around and say, "I don't think you should get married because marriage is this and marriage is that." That's again my assumption. But what I'm doing is I have him on the spot. He's extremely emotional, and I have to find out. You give me all of these responses that are really lies. You're not really giving me the true responses that I need to know how to help you. Do you actually want to do this? And he sat there for a while and thought about it. Now, I won't tell you the end result of what the response was and all that because it's irrelevant, but it's that question that might come across as callous and rude. So I have no problems doing that. Why? Because no other therapist wants to do that. So you should. This is an Ericksonian rule. He was big on asking the questions that no one wanted to ask. He didn't care about being rude. A lot of people said he was extremely rude. He was non-caring. He was cold. He was callous. However, he changed my life. And that's where I got this from. So guys, don't worry about asking questions in case you come across as rude or indifferent. Doesn't matter. Ask that question. And I guarantee if you ask it at the right time, that will be that breakthrough question and response that you're looking for. And it's so quick. Who cares if your client doesn't like you? We're not here for high fives like a big Tony Robbins seminar. I'm here to get things done. So I'm happy to ask those rude questions. Okay. So what should I ask but don't want to? If you get an instinct for that, that's the question you should ask. Not about being rude, just ask it. Lastly is number 5, what questions gave me unconscious response answers? So if I get stuck, I hit a wall, don't know what to ask next, I'll just quickly in my mind go back over the session and go, hang on, I remember asking a question 5 questions ago that gave me a really good unconscious response. If you get stuck and you notice that every response and question after that wasn't giving those unconscious responses, go back to question number 3 where it did and start from there. Ask that same question. Go back and say, hang on, a little bit lost here. Then ask that question again. Follow in line with those questions. Use those categories. If you notice every time you ask a client how they feel or they get emotional, stick with those. If you notice that every time you ask a client to explain their problem, you're getting information, they get stumped and they give you lies, it's a lot of consciousness, avoid those questions. I say this to say that I'm always looking for unconscious responses. And whenever my client gives them to me, and these are based on the responses they give me, I tend to follow those question categories. Okay? So guys, there it is. Very, very simple, but very powerful. And this will get you out of jail, for quote unquote, call this get out of jail free cards, over and over again. Now, sure, I gave you those 5 questions for on those other videos, but I could give you a list of 100. And I'm not expecting you. And I also say, don't rattle them off like an FBI interview. The next evolution to that is understanding these question frames, staying curious, wondering what your client's not telling you or not able to tell you, big picture questions, open-ended questions, rude questions, and also understanding and noting what questions and responses gave you the biggest unconscious moments. Okay, so hopefully that was informative, guys. It's going to be quite advanced for most people, but that's how we do it, guys. That's what to expect when you come along to our ACH trainings as well. We spend 3 days going through all of this because I've got to show you this, because what this does, guys, as an umbrella, it stops the techniques, the scripts, the assumptions, conscious information, unconscious information, understanding all of that stuff, because we all know hands down, we've been taught this. It's not just me saying it. There is no such thing as techniques and scripts. Why? Because they're all symptom-based. And these question frames allow you to find the unconscious payoff, which we know in more traditional terms is the root cause. That's why we have to understand this stuff. And that's why ACH sessions are so goddamn fast. Okay? So there we have it, guys. Hopefully that was informative. See you in the next video. Bye for now.